really the biggest question of Laura Loomer, right? Who's paying Laura Loomer? Is she influenced by lobbying firms? That's an important question, but that is all really a supplementary question. The big question, which is how does Laura Loomer influence the president of the United States? Like, the swamp hasn't been drained in Trump's Washington in any respect. It's just been replaced.
Well, from the National Security Council to Health and Human Services to the State Department, one person has a lot of power outside of the halls of government. That would be Laura Loomer. Maybe you've heard her name. Maybe you're not on social media much and you've never heard her name. But if you're reading the news about this White House and administration, you've almost certainly come across the name Laura Loomer. We are joined today by the journalist that I think has done the best job digging into exactly what Laura Loomer's influence looks like, because I can just tell you there's a lot of reporting that doesn't match reality on this question. But Gabe Kaminsky, who is an investigative reporter at the Free Press, just wrote a long investigation where he talked to Laura Loomer, he talked to other people in the White House, and reported out not just a story about Laura Loomer, but I think a story about how the Drain the Swamp administration is actually ending up cooperating with not the same old swamp, but maybe a newer version of the same old swamp. So before we bring Gabe in, just a reminder, please subscribe on YouTube, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for the full version of this interview, head on over to undercurrents.tv, subscribe there. You get the full experience of the show. And with that, let's go ahead and bring in Gabe Kaminsky. Gabe, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, there's only one White House official whose tolerance for Laura Loomer really matters, and that would be Donald Trump, which we'll get to in just a moment. But Gabe, tell us a little bit about who Laura Loomer is. Pretend you're talking to a space alien who knows nothing of Twitter or social media.
So Laura Loomer is a self-described opposition researcher and journalist. She cut her teeth in which she would describe as journalism, or many people would, but as at Project Veritas, which is a outfit founded by James O'Keefe. Laura Loomer has gained a lot of influence actually in this administration. She sort of over the past decade has cultivated a personal relationship with Donald Trump. On the 2024 campaign, Laura flew on his jet a few times, which gained controversy because of her prior remarks about Muslims and her prior remarks about things like 9/11, saying it's an inside job. She said the White House would quote unquote smell like curry if Kamala Harris won the election, which JD Vance and his wife had both sort of roundly criticized and said was racist, which is, I mean, just objectively a racist comment. But in the case of Loomer, she has leveraged her personal connection to Donald Trump and other people kind of in Donald Trump's orbit to sort of be this, what she would describe as an outside enforcer during Donald Trump's administration. She's been unearthing information about people in Trump's administration, calling for their firings, and in some cases, there's not there. Those people have been fired, and it's the really the most high profile example of that was Laura Loomer met with Donald Trump in the Oval Office several months ago to call for the firings of National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and officials who work under him, because she says they, like other people she talks about, are disloyal to Trump and disloyal to MAGA purportedly, or maybe have sort of liberal connections that Laura perceives. Not one day later, the president actually did fire the deputies to that national security advisor, and then soon enough, Mike Waltz was fired himself. Now, it's not always clear whether this activist, Laura Loomer, right, is behind all the firings. She certainly takes credit for a lot of them, but that alone has really risen her profile in Trump's second term.
Can you talk to us about the example of Venet Prasad? Because that seems to me combined with the NSC hemorrhaging after Loomer met with Trump and I think JD Vance in the Oval Office. Then the Venet Prasad example happened just a couple of weeks ago. Looks like he's back in the administration in some capacity. Venet has been on this podcast before, and I know he's written for the Free Press before as well. What happened there? Was Loomer? Does she seem to have been the consequential influence over the dust up?
So several weeks ago, Vinay Prasad, who works in the Food and Drug Administration,
Which
um,
is under the
Laura-
HHS, so ultimately
yes,
under Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
yeah, under Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s jurisdiction, essentially, RFK Jr. And uh, Loomer had posted an article and several posts on social media that essentially called Prasad, what she called a progressive leftist saboteur. Those were her words. She sort of unearthed Prasad's prior comments supporting like Bernie Sanders, I believe gay marriage, abortion, very sort of left-wing progressive
Or
policies.
Trump
And then
or
she,
Trump policies. Gay marriage and
yeah, I
abortion.
mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, for Trump's administration, right, there's a lot of people who years ago didn't necessarily promote conservative values. Or even support Trump. Right, the vice president of the United States was pretty staunchly anti-Trump not long ago. So anyway, Loomer was she posted a video on her website resurfacing remarks from a podcast in which Prasad made kind of a weird joke about who to blame for the COVID-19 pandemic, and Loomer interpreted his comments in a way that was, really pushing the boundaries of reality. She said that she took him very literally and said that Vinay Prasad said that he quote unquote stabbed a Trump voodoo doll to curse him,
Mm.
and that was evidence that he was disloyal to the president. So anyway, Loomer is surfacing things to link Prasad to the Democrats, and that coincided actually with the Wall Street Journal publishing a series of stories and pharmaceutical companies attacking Prasad
Mm.
because Prasad had halted shipments of a gene therapy drug
Mm.
made by a big pharmaceutical company called Sarepta.
Mm.
And that was something the Wall Street Journal published stories criticizing based on, I don't know, free market sort of concerns or otherwise. And not long after that, Vinay Prasad resigned at the FDA. And so again, that was a time in which it looked like, Loomer essentially got kind of another scalp. I think, in reality, in that moment, it was a combination of things, and that's really my understanding based on talking to current and former officials, which is that the pharmaceutical industry was really putting the pressure on Trump, and Trump just was fine with Prasad exiting the administration. That all changed, however. 2 weeks later, Vinay Prasad was back in the government. And it came actually after a staunch pressure, sort of lobbying campaign from RFK Jr. and Marty McCary, the head of the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically were saying that, this Vinay Prasad is a sort of necessary official for the FDA to carry out our work. And Trump decided to agree and let them back. What we detailed in our story that I think is important, and also there's another journalist, Lee Fong, who had pointed this
Mm-hmm.
out in his Substack, which is that around the same time that the pharmaceutical industry and the Wall Street Journal were attacking Vinay Prasad, and so was Laura Loomer, just before that, the company called Sarepta that made the drug maker, that Prasad had halted shipments of their drug. They hired a Republican lobbying firm in Washington.
Ballard, right?
Um, Michael Best Strategies,
Oh,
they're
Michael
called. Yeah,
Best.
Michael
Okay.
Best Strategies, and to lobby the executive office, the president, Congress, and the HHS.
And that's is that Reince Priebus's?
Reince Priebus, yeah, the former chair of the Republican National Committee. Now, we don't have evidence again that Loomer was working on behalf of Michael Best Strategies, but one thing is, in my story, in my reporting, I talked to 5 different Trump administration officials, 4 of which work in the White House,
Hmm.
who had described to us concerns and, sort of at least suspicion that Laura Loomer, in this example, and others her work may have been influenced by, motivations other than just loyalty to Trump, motivations such as potentially being paid by lobbying firms. I reached out to Michael Best Strategies with that allegation from White House officials, and they did not comment, but they declined to comment. Meaning they did not deny it on the record.
So that is a really, really interesting piece of information because if you have nothing to do with Laura Loomer, it would be the easiest and most logical thing for a swampy firm to do, um, to issue a denial. So let's all take that for what we will. Gabe, is there any other, in your reporting, were you able to uncover any other allegations that different people or entities have potentially been paying Laura Loomer to do their work? That is a deep suspicion among many people who have gotten on the wrong side of Laura Loomer's activism. So did you find anything other than the Sarepta example?
So I think I just want to point this out. Last
Mm-hmm.
summer, Laura Loomer told the New York Times, so she opened or sorry, not last summer, in June, she told the New York Times that she opened a consulting firm.
Mm.
And she had five clients, she said, and that she made income of $300,000 from that. I reached out to Laura for my story, and she had, said something akin to like, I'm not going to comment on, she did not want to comment on her clients or how many clients she has or how much money she has. Um, but what's notable is that I think, number one, fact, it is true that Laura Loomer has a consulting firm and that she has an, unclear amount of clients. And she actually told The Atlantic, which just published a story after mine, that she works on behalf of certain billionaires who she did not specify. Um, but the other thing that I noticed, White House officials pointed to a few other examples to us that I put in my story that they found sort of to be suspicious of Laura's advocacy, such as her advocacy related to Puerto Rico, which she had posted she's made various posts recently about issues related to Puerto Rico and its sovereignty. And then she also has made various posts recently about Venezuela, actually disagreeing with President Trump's $50 million bounty on Nicolas Maduro, based on some sort of disagreement about, whether that's empowering China or not. The specifics of those two examples aside, to White House officials, for Laura Loomer to be posting about Puerto Rico and Venezuela and certain other issues just felt very random and very left out of left field. Again, that is not evidence that Laura Loomer is taking, personally being handed checks to advocate and post about these issues. And it is true that she casts a very wide net and posts about a whole lot of officials and a whole lot of issues. But at least to people in the highest levels of government, that's sort of they're sort of frustrated and concerned and suspicious about, what prompts Laura Loomer and how does she pick her targets.
Yeah, I'm reading a Tim Carney headline here. Swamp undrained. Trump cozy lobbying firm sets K Street revenue record. This isn't about Michael Best. This is about Ballard Partners. But the point is that Tim reports the $20.4 million. That is their revenue just from April to June of this year. That is a record. It is the most lucrative quarter ever reported by a lobbying firm, even when adjusted for inflation, Tim writes. And the point of saying that is, there have been other stories gauging this as well. It is a bonanza in MAGA world right now because corporations are winning favor or falling out of favor. And Donald Trump is a notoriously difficult person to sort of know where his loyalties can be nudged in one direction or another. And that's why this point you're making about it sort of looking sometimes random, whether or not she's getting paid, totally open question. Obviously, she has a consulting firm, and that is an important point, as you know. But right now, there's a rush among lobbying firms, and you've covered this now for years, to find people who know the right doors to knock on. And it seems as though, even the Drain the Swamp crew is in on the action, Gabe.
Yeah, exactly. The swamp hasn't been drained in Trump's Washington in any respect. It's just been replaced. And we did a story on this when I actually started the Free Press in around March or April. There, as you just said, there's lobbying firms connected to Trump, whether through like former staffers or just other relationships.
Right. Ballard is
Ballard
connected through Susie
Partners,
Wiles and others.
Miller
Mm-hmm.
Strategies, ran by Republican sort of super lobbyist Jeff Miller,
Mm-hmm.
and other firms in Washington that, are making a killing right now and in legal ways. I mean, it's not illegal to work on behalf of companies and lobby the federal government. It's a very standard practice, but it is notable, right, juxtaposing that in connection to Trump's rhetoric as far as special interests in DC and the role they play. These lobbying firms are registering on behalf of hundreds and hundreds of corporations, trade groups, nonprofits, universities, foreign governments. And in some cases, there's former officials for Trump who are lobbying on behalf of foreign governments that I don't think the United States would necessarily recognize to be putting the interests of America first, or at least not what Trump would determine based on his policies to be, putting America first.
Now, there's some reporting to the extent that Susie Wiles, who does come from the lobbying world and the big money lobbying world, not small ball stuff, is she's one of those people who is probably been the most successful gatekeeper in terms of White House chiefs of staff. Who knows which one it is, Gabe? But maybe you do. But that Susie Wiles is someone who actually tries to keep Laura Loomer at arm's length. And so that speaks to maybe who is or who is not capable of being a gatekeeper for Donald Trump. What sense did you get of that in your reporting?
Yeah, I think the most important, really the biggest question of Laura Loomer, right? I think it's important, I'm trying to understand, I think a lot of reporters are trying to understand who's paying Laura Loomer.
Mm.
Is she influenced by lobbying firms? That's an important question, but that is all really a supplementary question. The big question, which is how does Laura Loomer influence the president of the United States, and through what ways does she do that? That's something I'm seeking to understand, and a lot of people, I think, I could say my understanding, is certainly that Laura Loomer does talk to President Trump, and she does seek to sort of be this like informal advisor to him, and sometimes she tells him things that he finds notable, and he tells his staff and raises those issues, and sometimes there's actions that follow that. My understanding from talking to another source close to the White House was that, yeah, Laura Loomer contacts President Trump a lot. He doesn't always answer calls. Sometimes he kind of rolls his eyes. That was a direct quote that a Republican operative close to the White House had told me. As far as Susie Wiles, I think it's kind of unclear. She has not spoken publicly on this issue, at least to my knowledge. The Atlantic story that recently went up, I believe yesterday or today, had said that Loomer interacts directly with Susie Wiles. That's not something I've confirmed. But I think this sort of ambiguity around Loomer's connections and her influence, perhaps that's kind of intentional. I've spoken to White House officials and other sources kind of in the White House orbit who have said, who have spoken favorably about Loomer. They view her as kind of an enforcer to whether or not she's always correct on issues, to hold the administration and their telling to be more to the right, to push the administration to, always sort of be thinking about loyalty and, who more aligns with the right. So, like, I spoke with a White House official a few weeks ago who said that they used this word, a fan of Laura Loomer. I've also been aware of other officials at other agencies who, when I mention Laura Loomer, they don't necessarily tell me that there's a direct line between them and Loomer, but they don't view her disfavorably. So I think she has more allies than just the president. I think she has officials at agencies who, can use her to go after their not only people that they may view as not sufficiently to the right, but their rivals in the government, right? Just like people that they dislike, because Laura has almost 2 million followers online. She has a really big platform.
For the full version of this interview, we're going to talk more about Israel. We're going to talk more about what Gabe's interactions with Laura Loomer was like and what the lobbying industry, as somebody who reports on it from Gabe's perspective, looks like in this Trump 2.0. How is it different? How is it the same? We're going to dive into greater detail. That's going to be over at undercurrents.tv. Head on over there to subscribe. We'll see you back here with more soon.